So society lies to you. It basically tells you that every terrible thing you go through, every heartbreak, every financial ruin, every incredible toxic work environment is secretly some kind of gift.
Right, the whole what doesn't kill you makes you stronger thing.
Exactly. We're totally conditioned to believe that suffering earns you an invisible diploma from the School of Hard Knocks. And once you have that diploma, you're officially wise.
Yeah, we wear our trauma like this cultural badge of honor, assuming that the heavier the burden you carry, the deeper your enlightenment must be.
But today, we are taking a deep dive into a text that just takes a massive sledgehammer to that entire worldview.
It really does. It's a profound shift in how we are asked to view our own pain. The text we're diving into is this highly provocative essay from December 2024.
Right, written by Xu Feng.
Yeah, written by Xu Feng and translated by Kinyu. And the title alone gives you a really clear sense of its uncompromising stance. It's called "A Thousand Cuts Won't Awaken People."
Man, what a title.
I know, right? The author is just systematically dismantling this deeply ingrained, almost universally accepted belief that human suffering serves as like a necessary stepping stone to a higher level of consciousness.
Okay, let's unpack this because I want to dive straight into the catalyst for this essay. The author is pushing back against a very specific theory that you see floating around the internet constantly.
Oh yeah, the 1% theory.
Exactly. This theory claims that only 1% of the human population will ever actually awaken through, the enlightened guidance of others, just a tiny fraction.
And the remaining 99%.
Right. The claim is that the 99% require the 1,000 cuts of harsh reality. Like they basically need the brutal beating of society to just shock them into waking up.
What's fascinating here is how the author attacks that premise head on. He argues it's not just mildly inaccurate, it's fundamentally backward.
It's doing the exact opposite.
Exactly. The core thesis here is that relying on society's beatings, subjecting people to those 1,000 cuts, it does not lead to any sort of spiritual or intellectual awakening at all.
It just grinds people down.
Yeah, it actively drives individuals and society as a whole into decline, decadence, savagery, and cruelty.
Which, it makes perfect sense when you step back and look at the actual mechanics of trauma. It's like asserting that if you smash a car engine with a hammer over and over again, the engine will eventually just figure out how to run more efficiently.
Right, like the metal is going to learn from the abuse.
Yeah. You aren't teaching the metal about the nuances of internal combustion. You are just denting the metal. You're creating a broken engine and calling it experienced.
That visual perfectly captures the author's argument. A hammer imparts damage, not knowledge.
Period.
And when we apply that to human psychology, being constantly battered by life doesn't suddenly grant you this magnificent elevated perspective on the human condition. It forces your brain entirely into survival mode.
You're just trying to survive the day.
Exactly. You stop looking at the grand design of the engine, right?
Yeah.
Because your entire existence narrows down to one desperate goal: figuring out how to dodge the next swing of the hammer.
Which naturally brings us to the historical track record here. Because if the School of Hard Knocks were like a real accredited institution that actually produced wisdom, humanity would be a literal utopia by now.
Oh, without a doubt. We've had enough suffering to enlighten the whole galaxy.
Seriously. And the author asks us to look at the undeniable evidence of our own generational lineages.
Yeah, the text points directly to our grandfathers and great-grandfathers. These were generations subjected to immense societal beatings.
Wars, famines, intense poverty.
Right. They endured those 1,000 cuts in the most literal sense. Yet their suffering did not awaken the generations that followed. We did not inherit a world of enlightened beings.
We really didn't. And the essay gets incredibly granular with this, looking at the institution of marriage as like the ultimate case study.
Oh, this part is so insightful.
It really is. The author notes that our parents' marriages were frequently unhappy, right? Filled with endless quarrels. Go back another generation, and our grandparents' marriages were often just as miserable.
Yeah, just enduring it.
Exactly. We have this long, unbroken, historical line of domestic misery. But all of that accumulated generational unhappiness didn't actually awaken anyone to the fundamental structural problems of how we approach marriage.
Right. It completely failed to trigger a revelation.
Yeah.
The author makes this really astute observation about modern behavior to back this up.
Because things are changing now.
They are. People today are beginning to reconsider marriage. But the text argues this shift has absolutely nothing to do with absorbing the painful lessons of our ancestors.
Right. It's not like we suddenly realized, oh, grandma was sad, let's fix the institution.
Exactly. People aren't waking up because their grandparents suffered. They are reconsidering marriage because of massive external systemic changes.
Yeah, the author points to things like the proliferation of the internet, the massive wave of urbanization, and just the crushing rise in the modern cost of living.
Those are the actual drivers of change.
Yeah.
It is new economic data and shifting environmental realities that are forcing a change in human behavior.
So it's the environment, not the trauma.
Right. The essay argues that if you took those external modern pressures away, the vast majority of people would just blindly step right back into the exact same unhappy, quarrelsome marriage models as their grandparents.
Wow.
Yeah, the suffering itself taught them literally nothing about how to build a better relationship.
Which brings up the most brutal and honestly the most fascinating example in the entire essay, the whole cycle of the daughter-in-law and the mother-in-law.
That is such a powerful dynamic to look at.
It really paints the picture. The author describes a dynamic where a young daughter-in-law endures terrible hardship. She's treated poorly, criticized relentlessly, and just suffers under the oppressive rule of her mother-in-law.
A very common historical trope, yeah.
Right. But eventually, the years pass, the power dynamic shifts, and she becomes the mother-in-law herself. And what does she do? She turns around and inflicts the exact same torment on the next young woman to enter the family.
It's a perfect loop.
But wait, I have to push back on the psychology of this a bit, because if you burn your hand on a hot stove, your brain learns not to touch the stove again.
You would think so, yeah.
Right. Shouldn't experiencing the cruelty of an abusive family dynamic teach you exactly what not to do? Why does the author insist that hardship just creates a copycat rather than, a genuine awakening to empathy?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at what survival mode actually teaches a person.
Okay, what does it teach?
You assume the lesson being taught is cruelty hurts, therefore I shouldn't be cruel. But the author points out that many of these people live in a constant state of pain and worry well into their 50s, 60s, or even 80s.
Just decades of survival mode.
Exactly. They never awaken to empathy because enduring that cruelty didn't teach the daughter-in-law about healthy family dynamics. It only trained her in the strict mechanics of the power hierarchy.
Oh, wow. So she didn't learn how to dismantle the hierarchy. She just learned that the only way to stop suffering is to wait your turn to be the one holding the whip.
Right. She learned the vocabulary of pain because that was literally the only language spoken in her environment.
That is so bleak.
It is, but it makes sense. When you are subjected to the 1,000 cuts, your worldview shrinks. You don't see a way to overthrow the oppressive system. You only see how the system operates.
You just learn the rules of the game.
Exactly. So when you finally gain a modicum of power, you operate the machinery exactly as it was operated on you. You don't inherently learn a new enlightened language just because the old language made you cry.
That is incredibly dark, but it maps perfectly onto everything we know about how cycles of trauma perpetuate themselves. And the text doesn't just leave this at the family dining room table.
No, it scales way up.
Yeah, the author scales this mechanism up to the macro level of entire societies to show us the ultimate devastating endpoint of this whole cycle.
Right. The author looks at the extreme results of a society entirely built on the 1,000 cuts. He points out that globally, tens of thousands of people commit suicide every single day.
Just a staggering number.
And he states with absolute firmness that this mass tragedy is not an awakening. It is the definitive tragic failure of the idea that hardship builds character.
It's the engine completely seizing up, right? Shattering into pieces because the mechanic just kept hitting it with a hammer.
That's a perfect way to describe it. The text uses a very visceral, physical metaphor to describe this outcome, actually.
Oh, the broken spine concept?
Yes. The author writes that generations of societal beatings have broken the spines of the people. This concept of the broken spine is crucial to understanding the essay.
How so?
Well, when a society relies on harsh reality and relentless struggle to teach its citizens, it eventually destroys their structural integrity. It destroys their willpower and their agency.
So even if someone does manage to look around and realize the system is completely flawed-like, even if they mentally wake up, it doesn't actually matter.
It doesn't matter at all because their backbone is gone. They have been worn down so deeply by the 1,000 cuts that they are physically, emotionally, and spiritually exhausted.
Just totally depleted.
Right. They're entirely unable to achieve anything, let alone contribute to the positive restructuring of society.
Yeah.
They might see the truth of their oppression, but they are too broken to lift a finger against it.
Okay, but the text takes a really sharp turn here, though, because we all know there are historical exceptions.
Sure, there always are.
There are those exceedingly rare individuals who survive the beatings, who somehow keep their spine completely intact, and who actively choose to resist. What is the author's take on the people who fight back and actually win?
Well, this is perhaps the most cynical, yet historically undeniable observation in the entire text.
Lay it on me.
The author states that when these rare, strong survivors finally manage to seize power and overthrow the oppressive system, they almost always turn right around and inflict those exact same cuts on others.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It is the ultimate toxic hazing ritual.
That's exactly what it is.
You suffer through this horrible, humiliating initiation into a group. You hate every single second of it. But 5 years later, when you are the one in charge, you subject the new arrivals to the exact same abuse.
And the justification is always the same.
Right. I survived it. It made me tough, so it's a necessary rite of passage. Experiencing the abuse completely strips away your empathy rather than building it. You don't become a heroic reformer. You just become the new oppressor.
Which leads the author to a really unyielding conclusion. He notes that it is incredibly rare for these hardened survivors to become compassionate Buddhas or bodhisattvas.
They don't become enlightened saints.
No, they don't. The historical experiment of this school of hard knocks has been running for thousands of years across countless empires and revelations.
We have a lot of data.
We do, and the empirical evidence is in. Awakening through suffering is a dangerous myth that only breeds a more efficient form of suffering.
Okay, so if the hammer ruins the engine, if the hazing destroys our empathy, and if the 1,000 cuts just leave us with broken spines, where do we go from here?
That is the big question.
Because the author doesn't just leave the readers standing in this depressing, broken wasteland, right? He actually proposes a path forward. If suffering doesn't cause an awakening, what actually does?
To answer that, the author introduces a completely different paradigm. He proposes a concept he calls Lifechanyuan's second home.
Second home. Okay.
And to be clear, this isn't just a mindset shift or a plea to, think positively. It is described as a new production and life model.
I want to make sure we don't gloss over that phrase. A production and life model means a literal restructuring of how we live.
Exactly.
Like how we gather food, how we share resources, how we allocate our labor.
Yes, all of it. To explain why this literal restructuring is necessary, the author presents a core philosophy about human nature itself.
Which is?
He argues that human character is not some mystical, fixed soul or an inherent personality trait. Human character depends entirely on the system in which it operates.
Oh, like a software analogy.
Yes. He compares it directly to a software program running on a computer.
So character is just an output. Like, if you are running on an operating system coded for scarcity, brutal competition, and constant threats, the 1,000 cuts, your character program has no choice but to output anxiety, greed, and ruthless survival tactics.
The author uses a fantastic analogy from the text to drive this concept home. He asks the reader to think about a modern smartphone.
Okay.
If you went back 100 years, people couldn't even conceive of a smartphone. Why? Because the underlying infrastructure, the satellites in orbit, the microchip manufacturing, the global internet, it simply did not exist.
Right, the hardware wasn't there.
Exactly. The operating system of their world could not support the concept of smartphone.
And he links that back to human enlightenment, right? He writes that you cannot realize a heavenly paradise without first entering a heavenly lifestyle.
The environment has to be built first.
The true path to an awakened mind, according to the text, is living joyfully, freely, and happily every single day. The infrastructure of joy is what actually allows the software of wisdom to run.
That's the core of his solution.
So what does this all mean? I mean, I have to challenge this heavily.
Go for it.
The software analogy is brilliant for diagnosing the problem, but the proposed solution sounds impossibly idealistic.
It's a big leap for sure.
Right. If human character is truly just an output of the environment, and our current global environment is a traumatizing system of 1,000 cuts, well then every single human alive is running a corrupted program.
That's the logical conclusion, yes.
So how do you build a flawless, utopian second home using a workforce of deeply traumatized, broken people? It feels like you're asking a drowning person to build a boat underwater. How do you transition from the old broken program to the new one?
That catch-22 is the crux of the entire philosophical dilemma, really. And the author's answer is absolutely uncompromising.
What'd you say?
He argues that you cannot patch a broken system from the inside. Without fully leaving the old environment and stepping into a fundamentally new program, awakening remains impossible.
Wow. So you can't install a brand new joyful app on a virus-ridden operating system? The system itself will just corrupt the file the second you try to open it.
That is precisely why the text insists on a new production and life model. It requires a hard break.
A total reset.
Yeah. You have to stop relying on the beating, stop trying to find the silver lining in the artificial scarcity, and recognize that the road of the thousand cuts is a literal dead end.
It goes nowhere.
Right. The environment must change completely, removing the artificial pressures that force us into survival mode before the character of humanity can change.
It's asking us to drop so much cultural baggage, you know? We are so deeply conditioned to validate our own lives by measuring how much pain we've survived.
We really are.
We want our scars to mean something. We want them to have a purpose.
And the essay strips away all of that romanticism. It forces the reader to look at hardship for what it actually is, a destructive force. It is an agent of decay, not an educator.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, I want you to really reflect on this in the context of your own life. Think about that invisible diploma from the School of Hard Knocks.
How much is it really worth?
Exactly. How often have you subconsciously believed that you needed to suffer to truly earn your happiness or your wisdom?
Or felt guilty when things were just going well?
Yeah. How often have you looked at someone younger, someone who maybe had an easier path, and thought, well, they haven't suffered enough to really understand the real world?
We all do it.
We do. But what if your moments of deep joy, your periods of absolute freedom and safety, were actually doing the vital work of expanding your mind while your pain was just teaching you how to hide?
If we accept the premise of this text, we have to fundamentally redefine growth. We have to stop using our accumulated damage as a metric for our enlightenment.
And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on, building right on top of this idea. If our character is truly just software running on the operating system of the specific society or family we grew up in, what happens when two people running entirely different operating systems try to communicate?
Oh, that's a fascinating question.
Right. Imagine one person whose life circumstances allowed them to be coded for joy, collaboration, and trust, sitting right across the table from someone who has been heavily coded by the thousand cuts for sheer, ruthless survival.
Two totally different worlds.
Can they ever truly understand one another's version of reality? Or will their code always get lost in translation, just endlessly spitting out error messages at each other? Give that some thought and keep exploring. And maybe it's finally time to take that diploma from the School of Hard Knocks and just tear it up.